Hi,
Hi.
I'm making you a co-host.
It looks like we already have people on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I thought we were going to get a little.
Yeah, no, they changed that.
That's all right. Okay. So I can go ahead and share my
Have
screen.
control of your PowerPoint and share your screen.
And I'll-
Hey, welcome to all you guys who are here already. I'm Sharon. I'll be your moderator or host for this session this afternoon. Thank you for attending. We're really glad you're here, and we're going to get started in about 15 minutes. If you have any questions or comments, you can go ahead and post them in the chat box. Hi guys, it's me Sharon. I'll be your host for this session. We'll get started in about 5 minutes. See you guys soon.
Don't turn it off. Show the music.
Okay, good afternoon and welcome to 2020 Teacher Leader Summit virtual series for the Louisiana Department of Education. My name's Sharon. I'll be your host and moderator for this session this afternoon. You are attending session E078 about classrooms for infants and toddlers. I think your speaker, Ms. Spano, is gonna take over in just a second. You guys are muted. If you have any questions or comments, you can go ahead and post them in the chat box as we're going through, and we'll try to address them. Thank you, and I'm gonna turn everything over to your speaker.
Hi, welcome everybody. Can you hear me okay? I guess somebody has to tell me they can hear me okay. Let's see in the chat box.
There we go.
Yes, you can. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I appreciate everyone being so, I guess we've got new protocols when you're doing Zoom sessions. Instead of, you know, I'm not in a room saying hi to everybody, but everyone's greeting everyone else through the chat. So I appreciate that. In order for me to go through the presentation, I am going to minimize the chat and the pictures, but Sharon, you'll help me. I would love to address questions as they come up. And there is going to be a part later on in the session where I'm going to show some brief video and I'm going to ask you to comment on the interactions that you're seeing. So I would like you to use the chat box at that time when we're going to have that interactive, as interactive as we can be on Zoom.
Sure, I'll let you know if you have questions.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm going to try to remember to pause and give you a chance to say the questions. My name is Cedra Spano. I work for Teachstone. I have been working in Louisiana for a very long time, or with people in Louisiana for a very long time, probably since 2012 or 13, when you all first started using class with toddlers and pre-K, and then added use of class for infants more recently. And then now you have a pilot for class in kindergarten, first and second grade. So we're very excited that class is being used so much in Louisiana. For this session, we are going to focus on infants and toddlers, so class for infants and toddlers. We're going to talk about the background and the context for the current focus on teacher-child interactions. We're going to learn how teacher-child interactions relate specifically to infant and toddlers' learning and development. We're going to talk about how the class tool defines and organizes interactions for infants and for toddlers. It is different than how it's done for pre-K. And we're going to watch some classroom video, just very brief clips, and identify effective interactions that we're seeing, both for infant classrooms and for toddler classrooms. So before I get started, I do want to ask about people's level of knowledge around class at this time. So if you could just let me know how many of you are brand new to class and you really don't even know what it is. You can just say, I'm new. Or if you're experienced with a different age level. So for example, if you've been trained in pre-K, but you're new to infant and toddler, let me know that as well. Oh, good. I see a few people saying they're new. Some people have K3 experience. Excellent. Oh, Afra, I know you. Excellent. This is exciting. Okay. So I'm seeing some people who are trained in pre-K or know a little bit about infant toddler are relatively new. Wow, we're just kind of some people are very experienced, and that's fantastic. So I'd love your participation for those of you who are experienced. Wonderful. I'm thrilled to see all this, that I've got a nice mix, but this session really is for people who are relatively new to the infant and toddler tool. And so I will do, and that's great. If you have no prior experience, that's the whole point of this session, is to really talk through, what class is, why interactions matter. So thank you for giving me that information. So interactions among teachers and children drive development. And we know how important interactions build relationships and trust. That's important for a number of reasons. It's important for social emotional development, but it's also important for children's learning and development. The class tool is the gold standard for teacher-child interactions, and that's why Louisiana has invested so heavily in use of class. So when we think about elements that influence learning, in the past, I think we would think about it in more of a structural way. So what we mean by that is the structure questions are the what, who, and where questions. So what curriculum is being used? What are the standards? What are the materials in the classroom? What's the teacher's training and level of education? So those structural features, which are very important to learning. But there's also another way to think about elements that influence learning in classrooms, and that's the process features. The process answers those how questions. So how is the curriculum being implemented? How are the standards being implemented? How is the teacher interacting with the children during the day? And how are the children interacting with each other? Or how is the teacher encouraging those interactions? And how is the teacher building relationships with children and also encouraging children to build relationships with each other? And we know that both of these elements, both structure and process, matter in terms of outcomes for children's learning and development. But what the research over the past, honestly, 15 to 20 years now is telling us is that structure flows through the process. And by that we mean the curriculum, it's not the curriculum itself that's making a difference, but how the teacher is bringing it to life for children that really matters and provides those learning opportunities. The class tool strictly focuses on process. It answers that how question around interactions. We're focused on improving our class scores, improving our interactions, because we know that as we make those improvements and are more consistent, we're improving children's outcomes. So this graphic is a clear representation that as class scores go up, so does student achievement. So we know that a lot of people are collecting class data, and it's very important to collect that data, but we want to use the data to drive the professional development that we're providing for teachers. That's where the impact happens. So it's wonderful to collect it, and we know that we have to collect it, and it goes into reporting and different things, but we want to use it in the way it was intended, which is to help teachers become more intentional and consistent in how they're interacting with children in the classroom. Okay, before we move in and start talking about the kind of typical development for infants and toddlers, I just want to pause and see if there are any questions. Okay, looks like we're good up to this point. Okay, how typical developmental stages differ. Okay, so the unique needs of infant. So the class tool defines infant as birth to 18 months. And these are some key characteristics. We know that interactions and relationships are very important, that face-to-face contact that we're having with adults with babies, that grabs their attention, helps build the relationship, and allows the adult to satisfy that child's need in that moment. We know that babies are sensory motor learners, that they're using all of their senses, they're touching, looking, feeling, putting things in their mouth, for example, and that they are other regulated, meaning that they need an adult to help soothe them if they're upset or having a hard time. They need others to regulate, help them regulate their emotions. So these are some of the unique needs of infants. Now, the unique needs of toddlers. Now, the class tool identifies toddlers as age 15 to 36 months. So you'll see there is a little bit of overlap because the infant tool is 0 to 18 months. We know there's a lot of development and growth happening in this toddler time frame. There's just exponential growth, both physically and in terms of language and cognition. They are still very dependent on adults, but they are really wanting to assert their independence and their autonomy. So that combination of, wanting to be independent, but also being dependent on adults can sometimes lead to some behavioral issues. So we're really working on this self-regulation and helping to responding to toddler behavior in a way that helps them learn appropriate behavior and how to self-regulate. And they are whole body learners. And we know this. I have a toddler grandson, and it's just a joy to watch him play, but everything is physical. He's bouncing on everything, his whole body learning for sure. So they're wonderful, active, entertaining young people. We know also that during the infant and toddler years that brain development is very, very key. We know that interactions and relationships and that trust building that happens there has an impact on brain development. That when babies have interactions and direct contact, and communication, back and forth conversation, when they listen to adults talking, that is building brain connections for them. So the relationships and interactions are very key to not just that social emotional connection, but also guiding children's learning and development as well, setting the stage for their learning and development. Okay, I'm going to pause again before I move into talking about the class tool and how it organizes for infant and toddler to see if there's any questions. I'm checking the chat, but it looks like we're good. Okay, so how does the class tool organize? So you all may be aware that we have the class tool at all age levels. Today we're talking about infant and toddler. Many of you commented that you're already trained in pre-K, some in K3. But we also have the class in upper elementary, grades 4, 5, and 6, and then secondary for grades 7 through 12. because interactions matter for learning and for relationship building at all age levels. So there are certain common threads across all of the tools. We're looking at effective teacher-child interactions or teacher-student interactions that are warm and sensitive and individualized, that are predictable, proactive, and engaging, and that are, create a stimulating and language-rich environment, and one that is also responsive to students, to children and students. So what it's going to look like in an infant classroom or a toddler classroom versus in a high school algebra classroom, obviously that's going to look different, but the interactions, these principles are the same, that we're looking for, in an engaging and language-rich and warm, sensitive environment, and good relationships between the adults and the young people, whether that's a toddler or whether it's a high school student. So the class is organized into domains and dimensions. For those who are new to the class, I'm going to teach you some of that language. So for the infant tool, we have one domain, and that domain is called responsive caregiving. It's just the broad category of interactions that we're going to be looking for in these classrooms. For infant, one domain, responsive caregiving. For toddler, we have two domains, emotional and behavioral support, and engaged support for learning. And then the pre-K tool has three domains: emotional support, classroom organization, and instructional support. So as children get older, you see that the tool gets a little more complex to address the different interactions around their developmental needs. So let's look more specifically at the infant tool. So we have four dimensions that make up the domain of responsive caregiving. So the broad category is responsive caregiving. The first dimension is called relational climate. Relational climate is about the relationships that the teacher or caregiver is nurturing with the infants in the classroom, that they have good relationships, that they are comforted by each other, that they're smiling, that there's affinity there, that it's a warm, positive place to be, that the caregiver is physically close with the infant, and that the infant is soothed and comforted by being near the teacher. Teacher sensitivity is the next dimension. Teacher sensitivity is about the awareness and responsiveness of the adult in the classroom toward the infant. So, again, how does an infant show that they have a need? Well, they may cry or fuss, and the teacher is in this situation aware of that need and comforts the child in the way that they need. So picks them up and is soothing to them. The third dimension is facilitated exploration. And that's about how the caregiver is helping the infant explore their environment and learn. So if an infant is, say, having some tummy time and is reaching for something that's just out of reach, the teacher is aware of that and might say, oh, would you like to see the blue ball? And maybe roll that blue ball closer so that the baby can touch it or push it. So if that's facilitated exploration. And then the last dimension is called early language support. So for infants, we're looking to see that the caregiver is responding to any communicative attempts that the infant is making. So if the infant makes a sound, ah or bah, that the teacher is responding to that and having, modeling a back and forth exchange there. And also that the teacher is using language, is speaking in full sentences, and is being responsive to the child. So that's how the infants learn new language, by listening and hearing, as well as being responded to. So those are the four dimensions that make up the infant class tool, and there's again one domain, responsive caregiving. The toddler tool has two domains. Emotional and behavioral support has 5 dimensions that define that domain. So when we say emotional and behavioral support, what do we mean? We mean positive climate, which is about, again, those relationships in the classroom, that the teacher and the children enjoy each other's company, they're smiling, they're laughing together, they're engaging in activities together, playing something, sharing something together, and that you can see the happiness and the joy in the classroom. Negative climate, which is the one dimension that we actually want to have a low score in. Negative climate is expressed negativity in the classroom. So obviously this is not something that we want to see, but it is things like harsh tone of voice, making threats, or using kind of, oh, if you do that, you won't, get X in a harsh tone, or any fighting or hitting that might happen among children. So that's negative climate. Teacher sensitivity. Again, that's the awareness and responsiveness that the teacher has to what's happening with a child, whether it's a child who is upset about something, or maybe a child who is trying to do a puzzle and is frustrated because they can't fit the piece in. So the teacher is, paying attention, is aware that the child is struggling with something and is responding quickly to address that concern. And that the child is comforted. So with each of these dimensions, we're looking, when an observer comes into the classroom, they're looking for examples of these interactions that are happening. They're looking at what the teacher is saying and doing, but they're also looking at the response from the child. So is the child comforted, for example, or is the child helped if they're having a hard time with something? So the fourth dimension that makes up the emotional and behavioral support domain is regard for child perspectives. And what that means is that the teacher is really paying attention to what is the children are enjoying, and is spending a little extra time on the things the child enjoys, is providing opportunities for children to make choices, to share their points of view, and to take the lead on something. So it's giving those appropriate levels of leadership and opportunity for children and following their needs. And then behavior guidance. So with toddlers, we are teaching appropriate behavior. So it's about what the teacher is doing to be clear about rules in the classroom, and to redirect in a positive and supportive way, and to, in a positive way, call out appropriate and positive behaviors that are happening. So that's behavior guidance. So those are the 5 dimensions that make up emotional and behavioral support. And then the second domain is called engage support for learning. And there are 3 dimensions that make up that domain. We have facilitation of learning and development. We have quality of feedback and language modeling. So facilitation of learning and development, it's similar to facilitated exploration in the infant tool, where, what is the teacher doing to help the infant learn and explore what's in their classroom or out on the playground? How are they seeing what kids are interested in and encouraging them? So if they're building a tower, maybe the teacher is asking, them to, oh, what do you think would happen if we put the big block on top? Or let's try it and see, oh, does it fall down? Or what else could we try to build? Just encouraging them to do a little more and maybe learn a little more from the activities they're doing without taking over their play. Then we have quality of feedback. That dimension is looking at how teachers respond to something that a child says or does, to help them gain a little more understanding, or to get a little bit more out of that lesson or activity. So if a teacher asks a question and a child gives a one-word response, and the teacher may ask a follow-up question, or provide a little bit more information or complexity to their answer, just to help them think about something or understand it at a deeper level. They may ask an open-ended question that's hard for a toddler to answer, so then they may break it down into maybe some yes/no questions that help them get to a more detailed answer. And then we have language modeling. So we're always working on building language skills, teaching new words, making connections to words that toddlers already know, repeating and extending the things that they say to help them, again, learn and develop new language skills. So that's a lot of information, but that's the 2 domains for the Toddler tool. So that gives you a big picture on the types of interactions that the class tool is measuring. And when an observer comes into your classroom, these are the types of things they're looking for. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to learn a little bit more about a couple of the dimensions. We'll look in a little bit more detail, and then we're going to watch some clips. And this is where I'm going to ask you to share some of your comments in the chat box. Okay. So first we're going to start with the dimension of teacher sensitivity. I do have the pre-K on here just to show you that we do have teacher sensitivity across all these tools, but we're just going to watch videos from infant and from toddler. So we're going to start with teacher sensitivity for toddler. So, pardon me, for infant. We're going to start with infant. So teacher sensitivity is the dimension. And what do we mean? We're going to break that dimension down a little bit further and say, what is it exactly that we mean when we say teacher sensitivity? Well, these 3 bolded phrases, awareness and cue detection, responsiveness, and infant comfort, these are called indicators. And within each indicator, we have specific behavioral markers. So these are the specific behaviors we're looking for when we do an observation. So when we say awareness and cue detection, we mean, is the teacher visually scanning the room? Is she attending physically if a child needs attention? Is she acknowledging verbally or physically? So if they need comfort, is she picking the child up to comfort them, the physical, or is she soothing them with her words? So that's the teacher being aware, and then also responsive. So responsiveness is one of the indicators. The behavioral markers are responding to the infant's emotions and needs and adjusting their actions based on the infant's needs. So these are the specific behaviors that we're looking for. And then infant comfort. So remember, we're looking at what the teacher is saying and doing, but also how is the infant responding? Is the infant comfortable or content when the teacher is present? Does the infant seek out the teacher? And is the infant soothed or calmed by the teacher's efforts? Okay, so those are the specific behaviors that we're going to look for. And I'm going to play the video clip. And then when it's just very brief. And when it's over, I'll come back to this slide so that we can talk about what interactions we saw in the video clip.
Morning. Hey, you're okay. It scared you, I know. Paul's gonna come and say hi to you. It's okay. Oh no, you love Miss Paula. She's your favorite. You can go see her? She's gotta wash her hands, babe. And then she'll come and talk to you. Who's this? It's Mr. Evie. You say hi. Oh, you're gonna give it kisses? Oh, love the Evie.
Okay, the clip is done. So I'm going to go back now to the previous slide so that we can look at the indicators and behavioral markers. So I'd like you to just take a minute and look at these and then write in the chat box, which interactions did you see in that video? Okay, so one person has said the teacher held the infant, gave comforting words, and offered to take the infant to someone that the infant likes. Absolutely. So when we look at these behavioral markers here, we see that the teacher was attending physically. She was aware of what happened. So when the first she visually scanned, thank you, Virginia, absolutely. When the new teacher walked in the room, she heard the the baby accidentally banged his head looking up at her, and he started to cry. The teacher who was there absolutely met those emotional needs of the child by responding, by picking him up, and by verbally soothing him. Oh, I'm so sorry that happened. She did attend to him, and she soothed him. And then, actually looking under the infant comfort indicator, was the child comforted by that? Did he calm down? I want everybody to interact. So go ahead and write your response to that in the chat. Yes, thank you. Yes, indeed. So we're watching what the teachers were doing, and then we're turning around and watching that the child was indeed calmed and soothed. And then you saw at the very end, the teacher did something to, yes, thank you. Someone said adjusted actions, and the infant was soothed and calmed down. That's exactly right. And she then picked up the toy and kind of distracted him with a toy. So she did a number of things there that quickly soothed the child and helped him calm down. Yes, thank you so much for your comments. You guys are great. I appreciate this. Yep, it is true that a couple, yes, someone commented that the other babies kind of crawled off the screen and we weren't able to see, but they were going, the teacher who was sitting was watching them, and they were going toward the other teacher, exactly. So that gives you a kind of an idea of when an observer comes into the room, the types of things that they're looking for. And I think it's important to note for any of you who are teachers who are on, that things happen in classrooms. Like, a child might cry or be upset. That is not going to impact your class scores in a negative way. What happens next is what's so important. How is the teacher, how are the adults in the room responding to what happens? Of course, babies are going to cry and things are going to happen, but what is the teacher doing to be aware and responsive and to comfort? And that's where you have the opportunity to actually get higher class scores when an incident like this happens. Yes. Yes, thank you so much for your comments. I really appreciate that. Okay, we are going to move on, and we are going to look at a toddler video next. So first, we're going to talk a little bit more about the dimension of teacher sensitivity for toddler. So we have 3 indicators: awareness, responsiveness, and child comfort, which is very similar to what we saw for the infant. Under awareness, we have 2 behavioral markers: attending to children throughout the classroom and noticing difficulties or children who are upset. And then responsiveness, responds to children's bids for attention, acknowledges and accepts emotions. So that's the teacher acknowledging and understanding and accepting a child's emotions. And then under child comfort, we have, does the child freely approach the teacher and participate or seek support? And is there a resolution to the problem? Okay, so these are the specific behaviors that we're looking for. And I'm going to play the next video.
It is big. Is it still heavy?
Yeah.
Is it? What happened, Andrew?
My
Oh no, did you forget where you were dumping the water? Oh no. Let's look. They're a little bit wet, Andy. After we're done playing in the sensory table, we'll put dry shorts on. Okay? Okay. They are a little bit wet. Yeah. Are you all done in the sensory table? Do you want to keep playing, or do you want to be done? Okay, let's take your smock off. They are wet, yeah. I see. Do you want to let them dry, or do you want to change them? Okay, all right.
Andy, should we go change your pants? Okay, I'll come with you to change your pants.
Okay, that's the end. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this slide so we can see the different behavioral markers here. And I'd like you again to use your, oops, what did I do? I didn't mean to do that. I was trying to get to the chat. I'd like you to use the chat again and let me know what interactions you saw in that toddler video that showed the teacher being aware, responsive, and then child comfort. I'll give you a minute to write in your comments. Yes, okay. The teacher, oops, your chats are going fast. The child was very, so this is an important point. I hope I say your name right, Milana made. The child was very articulate in responding to the teacher. So we're going to talk a little bit too about the difference between infant and toddler. So clearly this is a child who's very verbal, and the teacher is able to ask some questions and get input from the child about what he needs in this situation. So yes, the child was very articulate in responding to the teacher. The teacher acknowledged and accepted the child's emotions. And Paula, that's a really important point in this, because, you know, was it a big deal what happened? His shorts got a little bit wet. He was playing at the water table and he splashed. So to an adult, is that really a big deal? No, it really isn't. And the teacher could have handled this differently. So this is where teachers have lots of choices. She could have basically said, you know, told him not to whine, you know, or she could have just dismissed it and said, oh, it's no big deal, don't worry about it. But the child was worried about it. Several people wrote that the child was very upset. He was indeed. She gave the child a lot of choices, met the child's needs, because again, he was very distressed about his shorts being wet, and it was a big deal to him. And the teacher did give the child a large number of choices in there. She did not dictate what was going to happen, but she asked him each step of the way. Oops, you got a lot more comments. Yes, comforted him, gave him support and choices, noticed that he was upset and immediately asked what was wrong, moved closer and offered solutions. The teacher comforted because she heard him crying. I mean, obviously she was aware immediately that he was distressed. She acknowledged the emotions, yes. She was very attentive to him. Milena, thank you for telling me that. She gave the child choices, yes, attended to the child, noticed the difficulty, acknowledged his emotion, and then solved the problem. So that's an important question as well, because we want to look under the child comfort part of this. Did the child approach the teacher, ask for support and help, and was there resolution? And the answer to that is yes, that she gave him a lot of choices. And each time with the question, do you want to stop playing? Do you want to continue? Do you want to keep your shorts on and let them dry? Do you want to change them? And he answered each of those questions, and she acknowledged them and followed through, so that the solutions that she offered were followed. And yes, the teacher did notice that the child was stressed. And so what she did allowed him to unstress. Oh, this is interesting, Laura writes, she could use the opportunity to discuss sensory examples. For example, some people don't like being wet because it feels cold to them. That's true. There's always opportunities to expand. That's right. Let's see. Gold star for the supporting teacher in noting and picking up the conversation and moving into action. Yes, good point. The teacher told the child that it's okay. She offered solutions. She could tell he was upset and wanted to help. Yeah. She began, oh, that's interesting. Lashana points out that initially the teacher called him Andrew, but then changed it to Andy as she was comforting him. Maybe, you know, again, because of their relationship and her knowing maybe that was a way to just be more friendly and soothing. Really, really insightful. I'm so glad you all really are picking up on this. I appreciate it very much. Very wonderful comments. Okay, we watched this video. So we were focusing on the teacher sensitivity dimension, and we looked at videos for infant and for toddler and teacher sensitivity. Now we're going to look at language support. So you'll see again, infant, toddler, and pre-K. We have, well, it's called early language support for infant and language modeling for toddler and pre-K, but it really covers the same concepts. So next we're going to talk about language support for infants. And we're going to do same sort of process. We'll talk about each of the indicators and behavioral markers that define the dimension, and then we're going to watch some video clips. So under teacher talk, we have self-talk, describing classroom events, verbally labeling objects, and using complete and varied sentences. Under communication support, initiates sounds or words, imitates or repeats sounds. And under communication extension, provides words for infants' communication, expands and extends on infants' communication, and models turn taking. So again, the bold words are our indicators and the bulleted words are our behavioral markers. Those are the specific behaviors we're looking for and what an observer would be looking for who comes to your classroom. So I want to define self-talk. That might not be a familiar concept. That is when teachers are putting words to their actions. So describing what they're doing with words as they're doing it. I am going to pick up this piece of paper and hold it up now. Or I am going to pass out snack and I'm giving everyone 2 crackers. So that's self-talk. Okay, so I'm going to watch our video, and these are what we're going to look for under language support for infants.
Hey, want some help? Some help? Oh, there you go. That's good. Is it good? It's applesauce. Sweet and cold this morning, isn't it? It was warm yesterday, but today we took it out of the fridge. So now it's cold. Tortillas and applesauce? Oh, for Ethan. He does well with that. Steven, how's it going there? Let's put one on a spoon, and then Steven can have a bite, and Jason, here's a bite for you. Applesauce. I know you like it. Mama says you love.
Oh, that got cut off. Mama says you love applesauce. That's the end of that sentence. All right. Let's look back now at our indicators and behavioral markers for language. And I am for language support. I'm going to pull up the chat box, and I'd like you to put in your comments. What interactions did you see related to language support? The teacher verbally labeled the spoon and the applesauce. There was self-talk there. She was describing, oh, I'm going to pick up the spoon and I'm going to give you a bite and you a bite. Yes, she did use each child's name. Whoops, it's scrolling too fast for me. Let's see. She described, Nicole, that's a good comment. She described the difference in the hot and the cold from the day before. So I think what may have happened, we didn't see the child's face, but when she gave him the bite, he may have reacted that it was, and to show like it was cold. So she said, oh yes, today it's cold because we took it out of the fridge, and yesterday it was warm. Yes, and she did verbally label. She used complete sentences in describing, yes. Let's see, what other? She explained the textures, describing classroom events. So she said, oh yes, we're gonna give everyone a bite. Hey, how are you doing? She definitely modeled the turn taking, that each child was, she had an exchange with each child. Yeah, she was verbally talking about the applesauce, knew the different, it described cold and hot, exactly. Modeling the communication, made contact verbally with each of the children, that's right. You can tell she knows her students' likes and dislikes, that's right. So she commented, and that's how we can tell by what she said. Oh yes, you like applesauce. Mama says you like applesauce. And oh, you want a bite? And here's a bite for you. Absolutely. So in this just very brief clip, we see the teacher interacting with each child, using self-talk to describe what she's doing, labeling the objects that are happening, that she's using, the spoon and the applesauce, and let's scoop one and give you a bite. She used complete sentences. At the beginning, so under communication support, it says imitates sounds or words, or, initiates or imitates or repeats. So and communication extension as well. So providing words for infants' communication. So I don't know if you all noticed at the very beginning, a baby said, ah, made that ah sound, and she said, ah, applesauce. So she made the connection with the sound that he was making in the beginning of the word applesauce, and it kind of expanded on that as well. That happened at the beginning. Excellent. I think we've captured. She did pull one of the children closer to her to make sure that he was, you know, kind of in the group there. Absolutely. Excellent. Very good comments. I appreciate that. Called children, describe the different types of food, the cold and hot, and how they felt in the mouth. Yeah, absolutely. So she was descriptive in some of the things that she was saying to help them understand. Absolutely. Thank you for those comments. All right. We will now move to our next. We're going to do language modeling for toddler. So now we have 4 different indicators. The first is supporting language use. So here we have some new behavioral markers, back and forth exchanges. And that's so I'm saying something and the child says something, and then the adult says something and the child says something. So we're having this back and forth. Contingent responding, which means that we're sticking to a subject. So the child's asking, or a teacher says something, the child responds related to that same topic. So they're not just jumping all over the place, they're sticking with a topic. And that there's some open-ended questions. So the teacher might ask a question that does not have a one-word response. Repetition and extension. So we're looking for the teacher to repeat what the child says and maybe add to it, extend it. Self and parallel talk. So self-talk we discussed, which is describing your own actions with words. Parallel talk is describing someone else's actions with words. So maybe you're describing what a teacher is doing, another teacher, or a child, or a character in a story. So describing someone else's actions. And advanced language. So that's using a variety of words, different vocabulary, labeling things, and making connections to familiar words and ideas, which is important because children learn new words by making connections to words they already know. So if a child uses the word big and a teacher might respond, it is big, it's huge, or it's enormous, and making that connection to those new words for the same thing so that they can learn those new words, okay? So these are the interactions we're going to be looking for in our next video.
Uh-oh. George is getting into something, isn't he? He's getting into the pancake mix.
He's got a spoon.
He got a spoon? Yeah, he forgot his spoon, didn't he? He's running away without a spoon.
Is that a big bear?
I'm saying, where is he going? I think he's where do you think he's going? You don't know? Maybe he's gonna go to the store and get more pancakes. Think? Look at all these pancakes. They put syrup on it.
She can't hear you.
Yeah, he's gonna hear me. When I talk, he hears me. It's a microphone.
What was that?
Yeah.
You gonna dance?
Oh, it's a baby blue.
We're gonna dance after breakfast in a little bit, okay?
In the small car.
On the floor?
Mhm.
It's another one.
Do you want to do the ribbon dance?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Like
And dance with your ribbon? Yeah. We'll do that a little bit after breakfast, okay? When all our friends are here. Okay? Look at George. He's making all the pancakes. Look at that. He's flipping them really, really fast. Look at that. Oh my goodness. He can make a lot of pancakes at once.
Ooh, who's that?
I don't know. It looks like a grandpa. Maybe it's the girl's grandpa. He has glasses on like me.
I do.
I have glasses and he has glasses on his face.
She doesn't have glasses.
She doesn't have any glasses.
She has glasses.
Oh yeah, she does. She has glasses. Makes her see better.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get back to our indicators and behavioral markers for language modeling. And I'll give you a second to write into the chat which interactions you saw there There were several different conversations that happened between the teacher and the child in that moment. Yes. Okay. She followed, the teacher did follow all the changes in subject. So there were several different conversations, several different back and forth exchanges. She did repeat and extend a couple of times some of the things that the child was saying. So there was one back and forth was about the glasses and about the pancakes that they were in, that was part of the story. There was some advanced language used. She used the word microphone, and they had a little back and forth exchange because the child noticed the microphone that the teacher was wearing. So I'm going to see if anybody commented on that. There were a few open-ended questions. You know, what do you think is going to happen? Or why do you think they did that? Or where do you think they're going to go? Questions like that. Yes, she did. So when she with the microphone comment, first the child said something like, he can hear you, like she pointed to it, and the teacher then confirmed, yes, when I talk into this, he can hear me. It's called a microphone. And so that's really important, that you're not just using a new word, but you're explaining what that new word means so that there was a context for her to understand. The teacher did adjust the conversation based on the child's attention span and what the child wanted to talk about. She did repeat several times what she said. There was another brief conversation that happened in there about dancing. Does anybody remember that one? She started with the story. She adjusted the conversation as the child kind of stopped and asked. So first they started the story. The child stopped to ask about the microphone. Then she went back to the story. Then the child asked about dancing. So that back and forth exchange happened. The child said something about wanting to dance, and the teacher repeated, oh, you want to dance? Do you want to use your ribbon when you dance? And then we're going to do that when all our friends are here a little bit later. So we did see several, she asked if she would like to dance with the ribbon. So she extended the conversation and added to it when the child brought it up. So we heard multiple back and forth exchanges. There was contingent responding. They did stick to the topic, several back and forths about the microphone, about the dancing, and about what was happening in the story. She did repeat and extend several times comments that the child made. Let's see, describes her own or the children's actions. I'm not sure if I heard her do too much of that in this. She held up the book and commented on the reading, so maybe that there was a little bit of that there. And then we heard some advanced language. She definitely was labeled the microphone, talked about the ribbon in the dancing, talked about glasses from the story, about the pancakes that they were cooking. So there was a variety of language used there. Excellent, very good. So we just have about 10 minutes. Well, I'll try to finish up in about 5 so that we have a chance to ask some questions at the end if you'd like. But I'm just going to share a little bit with regard to class data for infant and toddler. I do want to be really clear that we do not have national averages for infant and toddler like we do for pre-K. But we do have some research that's been done. So these are some averages pulled from of some research studies that were done. It's a small number of classrooms, but these are some of the means and the ranges. So for those of you who are new to the class, it is each of the dimensions is rated on a 1 to 7 scale. With everything except for negative climate, obviously we want to be in the higher range. With negative climate, we want to be in the lower range. Okay, so these are just sharing some averages that we do fairly well in relational climate and teacher sensitivity in the upper mid-range, in the mid-range for facilitated exploration, and then we are in a little bit in the lower mid-range, but for early language support. And again, these are not national norms or data at all, but they are based on some research studies that have been done. that's for infant. And then for toddler, you can see, again, this is from different types of centers, some observations that had been done at Teachstone. Again, these are not national averages, which is based on some research that we had done. You'll see that we have fairly high scores in emotional and behavioral support and lower scores in engaged support for learning, which really does mirror what we see with pre-K as well, that in pre-K that those instructional support scores tend to be lower, and that we do fairly well in the emotional support and classroom organization for pre-K. All right, I am happy to answer any questions that you all may have. While we're thinking about questions, I'm going to show you this picture. That's my grandson. This was taken a number of months ago before the toilet paper shortage, I will tell you, because we all ran out around in North Carolina. That's where I am. I don't know if that happened where you are. But he is the light of my life, and it's been just a joy to experience toddlerhood again. And I've got my email address up here on the screen. I am happy to have you contact me if you have any questions after, but I'll also check the chat now. Oh, thank you. He is precious and adorable. I'll take everybody's awes. I do love him so much. I'm lucky he lives here in Charlotte where I live, so I get to see him quite a bit. And I have another one on the way in July, but that one's going to be in Florida. So I'll get to see him as much.
Too bad. Florida. Well, you'll have to visit him.
Oh, I will do it as often as I'm able to. Thank you so much for your sweet comments. I appreciate that. And I will say, though, that understanding the infant and toddler class has been so valuable. By the time I learned it, my kids were, long grown, but now to have it with my grandchildren, to be able to talk with them and read with them and really see this language development and how important it is, it's so in my mind how important these interactions are.
You're getting a lot of compliments.
Oh, great. Well,
about the about the information you share.
I see somebody asking about getting a certificate. Do you know?
Yeah, the Louisiana Department of Education does not issue certificates of attendance for the Teacher Leader Summit. So what they recommend is that you print your schedule that you used to register in the Sketch app. If you just print that out, then that is documentation that you attended.
Thank you all so much for your sweet comments. I really appreciate it. Oh, wait, do we ever know? Someone's asking some questions I need to.
Special ed specific class tool.
Wow, that's a great question. Teaching nonverbal. I can tell you that there is a session tomorrow that my colleague Sarah Haddon is doing that is about using class and with special ed. And I would encourage you to take that and ask. We do not, as far as I know, there is no plan to have just a completely different class tool that would just focus on special ed, but there are some different ways, some adaptations that can be made. I'm not an expert in that, but I would absolutely encourage you to attend Sarah Haddon's session tomorrow. If you're not able to, Paula, please email me after and I will connect you with Sarah.
No, I'm not seeing it. If you guys do have a question, let's see.
Oh,
I have unmuted all participants. If you can't unmute yourself, just send me a message and I can unmute you so that you can ask a question. Okay, Leslie Doyle has posted in the chat box that we will be offering credits to childcare teachers that registered through the Sketch app and who attended the session. Certificates will be emailed to the email that you provided at registration. I stand corrected.
Oh,
thank you, Leslie.
Can you unmute her if she wants to say something?
I sure can. Let's make her a co-host. That'll unmute her. Okay, I'm Leslie. I made you co-host, so let's see.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, so we are working with the email address that's provided through registration that's linked in the Sketch app. We're comparing that to attendance on at each session, and then we will be sending out all of the certificates at one time after the summit. And this is mostly for our childcare teachers that we know have those hours that are needed.
Excellent. Well, I just want to thank everybody for participating so much. It makes a big difference when you're doing, and especially doing it virtually like this. I really appreciate everybody's participation. It made it a lot more engaging, even though we aren't in the same room together.
We're getting lots of thank yous, thank yous.
Thank you.
Anybody, we have about 4 more minutes. Anybody have any questions?
Great. Paula, I'm glad you're signed up for that session. I think anyone who's interested in getting that additional information on use of class in special ed, I would really encourage if you're able to go to the session with Sarah Haddon tomorrow.
Leslie, I'm sending you a message that
You are all so welcome.
if any, okay, and Leslie has another point. If you experienced any technical issues during the session, don't forget that the sessions are recorded and are posted on the YouTube Summit playlist. So if you need to review something because you had issues with connectivity or internet outage, or just go to the LDOE Summit YouTube playlist and you can get a copy of the video from this session. Thank you, Leslie.
I'm curious, Sharon, do you know how many participants we had on?
Well, right now we're at 85, but some people have already signed out because they didn't have any questions.
All good.
And you guys don't forget to do your evaluation in the Sketch app. When you're in the Sketch app for this session, you will be able to, at the bottom, provide feedback about this session. Leslie, I have a question. How does one get credit for the YouTube version? I am going to take down the name of the person who's asking about how to get credit from the YouTube version and try to get an answer for you.
Great. I see another question about asking, it says, will paraprofessionals receive certificates as well? They need the hours also. So you may want to have her follow up on that question as well.
Yeah, I think she had to go to another room.
Okay.
I will. So let me get the names. Yeah. And then we have okay.
You got it.
In an admin. Let's see. I think I got y'all.
All right. Well, I am going to stop the share on this.
Okay.
All righty. I'll
All
log off.
right, you guys, thank you, Cedra. Thank you very much. I enjoyed your session. We're lucky to have you share your information with us.
With my pleasure.
Appreciate
Thank
you.
you all so much. I really
All right.
appreciate it.
Have a great afternoon.
Bye.
All right. So for you guys that I'm getting your names out of the chat box, just post your names. Let's see. I got it. All right, now I got. I'm gonna get an answer for you guys about those certificates. So you. That one. Oh, got this one. All right, I got everybody down. All right, well, thank you guys. Have a great afternoon. Try to stay out of the weather and probably see some of you guys tomorrow for the rest of the sessions. Bye.